Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Danny here. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about Cigarette and Cherry. So let's go ahead and get into this. Started in 2017, written and drawn by Daishiro Kawakami. It's serialized in Manga Cross. Now, this took a while to look up. Just saying Manga Cross, when you try to look it up, it doesn't bring a whole lot. Luckily, I found his Twitter. Turns out Manga Cross is a website that publishes online manga for free. It's very similar to, if you guys remember a few years back, I talked to the guys over at Leshin. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's the Korean manhwa app to where you could read chapters for free for a certain limit anyways, and then you have to buy some coins if you want to continue. Kind of similar to here. When I went on the site, it's Japanese only, of course. The first 3 chapters were free, and then the latest 3 chapters, I believe, were also free. But if you want to read in between, you have to unlock them, and I'm assuming it's by some sort of point-based system. Obviously, going through scanlations, there are physical volumes, but they're not, out here in the West. Looking into just the series online, it's not that big. There's just not a lot of popularity. I could see not a lot of fans for the series, which is sad to say, because I really like the series. The biggest thing is the artwork. I really like this art. This is a romance comedy series. There's humor when there needs to be humor. It involves our main characters here, and similar to Goblin Slayer, they don't have names. They just have titles, right? So it starts with our young lad here, fresh out of an all-boys high school, looking for his first love in college. And so he's read the books, he's checked the websites, he's going by the numbers, trying to find somebody to talk to. And who does he see? His senpai over here smoking a cigarette. And so he tries to go for one of his, basic tactics here. It's like, hey, can I borrow your lighter? And then try to go from there. Obviously, she reads right through him, calls him a cherry boy, right? Cherry in Japanese, when you're referring to a boy, refers to, them being a virgin. Thus, the series title, Cigarette and Cherry. Now, after this embarrassing encounter, he decides he's going to put all this effort to get her attention and to eventually form a relationship. And that is the basic premise of this series. And it's really just starts off with a lot of scenarios of him meeting her at the cigarette spot here at this university, and just trying to strike up conversations, ask her out on dates, just try to get in as much as he can. And I forgot to mention, but she's also a senior who just graduated or is graduating this year because they still meet up at the university. At first, the art was just a little rough, got way better incredibly fast to where the art is now. And again, I really like this art. Yeah, man, this is one of those series that I really vibe with. Eventually, it becomes sort of like a slice of life, right? Because we're introduced to more characters in the cast, right? We find out, the senpai here works at a coffee shop, and then we're introduced to her coworker, who is Blondie, as some characters call her, or just the big boob girl. And then we get to one of my favorite characters, hands down, has to be the boss, short old man. And whenever you have a short old man who's more or less wholesome, it's always the best time. Always my favorite characters, and he can have fun too, and that's when it gets pretty good as well. And it's them for the majority of the series, and then we're introduced to a brand new character, Namajime, but we could get to him later. So yeah, this first chunk here really is the rookie, as the boss calls him, trying to get attention for senpai. This storyline, the setting, the tone, it really reminds me of like early to mid 2000 movies that are like this. I've been trying to think of a specific like movie titles to bring up about this, but it just loses my mind. One I could say is Adventureland. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that one. That's with Jesse Eisenberg and Kirsten Stewart, I believe is her name, right? From the Twilight series. And it's sort of just them in this summer vacation right? Just living through life, they're both interested in each other and starts to try to make things happen. That kind of setting. Similarly, I guess you could also say like the whackness, detachment, some of my favorite movies, and just that kind of aesthetic atmosphere, right? There was the ending for this episode is going to be from Rav, and he posted this single, right? We Need to Talk. And if you go to his Twitter and find it, you'll see this FMV he made using a ScarJo movie, and that's all I could think of is this specific type of story. Honestly, like if you would break it down, I'm assuming how the series would end is them getting into a relationship or at some point, but just having that whole movie like that, just that as a movie, it would totally fit into this genre that I'm thinking of. Another example would be the second half of Aku no Hana, right? Flowers of Evil, the second half of that series where our main character is, starting over life, and then he meets this girl, and then, they become friends, and then it becomes more than just friendship, and just the type of feelings and expressions going throughout that second half is totally in here, and it's really great. And I mentioned comedy. It's in here when it's appropriate, and I think it's really great. Because it's being translated by fans, right? Scanlations. We are behind, because when I checked the website, I saw we were at chapter, I think it was 108, so I'm roughly 45 chapters behind. But also the interesting thing is, because I was trying to figure out, I'm like, okay, it's been 3 years, this many chapters is out, is this a monthly, is this weekly? I was trying to understand how frequent this series was, and then looking into it, the dates are inconsistent schedules, so I think whenever this mangaka makes a chapter and it's finished, he just puts it out. It does a really good job with pacing. At first, it's like, okay, well, all right, we have this Kohai and this Senpai. Kohai's trying to date the Senpai. Simple stuff. This first time experiencing any of this, so it's super awkward. And since he's much younger, they really show the age gap, essentially. I don't think it's too big. We don't really get their age. It's clearly like, oh, he's clearly the loud, energetic type, and she's the quiet, stoic type. Not really clash, but it's clear what the differences are for their personalities. And especially in the beginning, because this guy, their main character here, Cherry Boy, Kohai, Rookie, whatever we're going to call him, has blonde hair that's spiked up. Pretty generic, like fresh out of high school kind of stuff, Dachi Kokosei energy with this character. And when he eventually decides he wants to be more mature, so he dyes his hair black, and it's actually down instead of up. I think his character design looks a lot better. Character progression makes total sense. And I mentioned pacing because, once we're introduced to these other characters, they really don't get into the way of the story. Because usually it's like, oh, okay, let's expand more into these characters. And that does happen, but it happens after a good point for the series to start expanding, right? Because usually when you have a series like this, and it's like you only want to see just the main plot, right, of our two main characters trying to get together, and then everything else is like kind of in the way and distracting to the point where our main characters don't even show up anymore in chapters, and like there's arcs without them, and it's involved with other things, other relationships building. But here, once a significant moment happens with the relationship between this Kohai and Senpai, that's when things start to expand, right? Mainly with Blondie here and this new character, Namajime, like things start happening there, and it totally feels fine because it's well paced into what our main story is doing, right? So there'll be a break with our main story. Let's just throw this in there, and it fits really well. Overall, really enjoy this series. Also surprised to see such a small roster for this series. Usually it would expand more, but you know what? I think I know the reason why. I mentioned they're from a university. We don't see their university life. It's just them talking by the ash pillar, I guess what they're called, right? Where, it's like an ashtray on a pillar at the school, and that's the only time we see them. And then even outside of that in the cafe, they rarely talk to people, or they're confronted by other people that's not part of the series. And that's pretty refreshing, because now we could really get into the characters as much as possible, as often as possible. Like, that's all it is, just character development, a couple comedic bits, and that's it. And I think that's really great. I only wish we were caught up, because as I was going through the Kawakami's Twitter here, just trying to, find info for Manga Cross, and then I saw some screenshots of like future chapters, and I was like, oh, am I spoiling myself? And I kind of got a picture of what was going on, and I just really want to read more. I actually reread it because it's such an easy read, right? 64 chapters. It's not that dialogue heavy, but since the pacing is really well done, it's really a breeze. You could get through all these chapters that are uploaded now in like 2.5, 3 hours casually. So what I'm trying to say, guys, is definitely go check it out. Would like to see this get a bigger fan base. Highly recommend. Yeah, again, it's only scanlations, so that's the only bummer out of this. In the meantime, guys, if you have any questions or comments, remember unfirstpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know if you check this out and what you think. And if you want to stay updated on the latest episodes, Unversed Podcast, anywhere on social media you go. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for listening, and we're going to catch you on the next episode.
Conceal emotions that we ain't supposed to feel. We open up new wounds before the old ones heal. It's cold as hell, I try to hide my broken self, but if we can't be real with one another, no one's real. But maybe real is overrated. Let's not overthink it or debate it, just avoid an altercation. I keep running from trouble that I've orchestrated. I was born distracted, you were born impatient. Despise this tri-circus, tracing my steps, I pace in tight circles. I don't see great, you're great, then I'm worthless. You said we need to talk,